again quoting John Paul. In the Church's history, we have constantly witnessed the phenomenon of more or less vast groups of the faithful, which under a mysterious impulse of the Spirit have been spontaneously moved to join together in pursuit of certain charitable or sanctifying ends. This has come about in relation to the particular needs of the Church of their day and even involved active collaboration in the Church's essential and permanent mission. So we spoke before about this is right through the history of the Church, constantly through the history of the Church. There are some distinctive elements because in every age, the expression of renewal movements is distinctive to that age, because the issues and challenges of the age, of the culture, of the historical moment, of the situation of the Church is particular to that moment in history. So we would say, and it's a question I like to ask, why have particular charisms finding expression in particular movements been of the nature that they are in our moment in history? I've got some theories about this, but I think it's a very good question to ask. That this is something distinctive for this moment in history, because I think the Church and the historical moment of civilization is such that something very particular is needed. And this is the grace of the movement, and the charisms then have a character particular to this moment. And people form around the charism. I think firstly they often have a sense that the charism is somehow capturing something that they see as essentially important for themselves. Why have I drawn and become and participated in the group or the movement to which I belong? Because we've been drawn to say it's answering certain questions, it's meeting certain needs. It's actually a realisation of something that is a deep need within myself, and that's why I'm participating in it. But it's also saying that this group and this movement is also somehow a charism that is needed by the Church for this moment in history. So what I'm experiencing as being of assistance in my life is something that is actually saying that there are others out there too who need it. We're not just kind of an unusual group of people who just happen to like singing in tongues or something. This is touching a reality that is across the society, across cultures. So what is important is that the forming of a movement is somehow a fruit of the impulse of the Spirit with the free will of those who choose to embrace the movement. It's important to recognise that the founder does have a special influence, but the Pope goes on to say that the passage from the original charism to the movement that happens through the mysterious attraction that the founder holds for all those who become involved is his special spiritual experiences. So he's saying that the charism becomes embodied in a founder, and others are drawn to share this because they sense that it has a spiritual attraction for them. Fourth point I'd like to say is that movements are an outworking of the grace of baptism. This, I think, is something that is very important, that ecclesial movement is based essentially in baptism. An ecclesial movement involves lay people, priests and religious. But the priests and religious aren't involved. I'm not in this movement because I'm a priest. I'm in this movement because I'm baptised. And priests and religious who become involved in it see themselves as coming in, firstly on the basis of brotherhood and sisterhood with the other members of the community. So it's not so much, and often the ecclesial movements haven't been such that it's been a priest who's led it from a point of view of his priests have been involved as leaders, but in the end it's been this sharing of baptismal dignity that is of vital importance. Again, Pope John Paul, even in the diversity of their forms, these movements are marked by a common awareness of the newness which baptismal grace brings to life. through a remarkable longing to reflect on the mystery of communion with Christ and with his brethren. So it just reminds us that in the end, I think what movements are about is living baptismal grace. That's essentially what they're about. And so movements really are focused on people living out their full Christian identity and calling. Again, the Pope, members of the Church who find themselves in associations of movements seek to live under the impulse of the Spirit, the Word of God, in their concrete lives. They do so by stimulating with their witness, constantly renewing spiritual progress, by evangelically vivifying temporal realities and human values, and enriching the Church through an infinite and inexhaustible variety of initiatives. He says there, later on, he says, movements have helped you all rediscover your baptismal vocation. 5, communion with the Church. Movements can be composed of Catholics and have a Catholic identity, but there can be a danger of communities that are not fully, that have other members who are not Catholic, that they somehow can operate separately. And I think that's why Catholic fellowships have been formed within ecumenical communities. And I think that's been the vital thing. I think it's also very important, and that this is something that's sometimes charged against communities, is that the communities don't see themselves anyway as elitist or become critical of ordinary life in the church. You know? Now, there have been dangers of that happening in the past, or even that's the way sometimes it can be perceived. That there are those of us in the communities, and then there's a lower level of life in the parishes. I really think we have to be very careful of allowing that to happen subtly develop. To say that we're the super Catholics and the super Christians, and then there are, the others. I think that has passed a lot, because I think communities and movements have been chastened somewhat in various ways over time. And I think it's important that we do move to a new level of maturity and humility that goes with that maturity. In 1998, I think Pope John Paul made a very important comment and gave a clear call to the communities. He said, today, he says, a new age is unfolding before you, that of ecclesial maturity. The Church expects of you the mature fruits of communion and commitment. Now, that's, I think, a very important statement. What he's saying is he says, look, you've lived under this first flush of enthusiasm and wonderful things happening, and that's been great. So, but I want to call you to ecclesial maturity, to a maturity within the church, and to see your place in the church, and to find that your place in the church will be reflected by the qualities of community, of communion and commitment. Now, the communion means that we don't just set up legal structures, say, the bishop thinks we're all right, the bishop's approved our statutes. Communion is the term of actual engagement with our brethren in the church at a personal and spiritual level. We don't just see ourselves as out there a bit different, but we are prepared to walk with shoulder to shoulder with our brethren in the church. And this communion means that we also have a mentality of orienting ourselves to and with the church. So that we don't just walk along the parallel with the church. We don't just have our own things, and every now and again we'll dip in, like we'll go to Mass on Sundays, or we'll do a few things that link ourselves with the church. But really, we're about our thing,